Problem number 2 on ECM homework number 5. Stephen is trying to keep healthy and is keeping track of his vitals every day. So when he wakes up, he takes his resting pulse by counting his pulse for 15 seconds. He counts 18 beats in 15 seconds. What's his heart rate per minute? So if it's 18 beats in 15 seconds, then what we're really trying to figure out is how many beats in 1 minute. But 1 minute is 60 seconds, so this is 4 times more. So what we're really doing is we're basically saying that, well, in 4 more times, this whole scenario is going to happen 4 more times before you get to a minute. So you can take the 18 times the 4, and you get 72 beats per 1 minute. So 18 times 4, 72 beats per minute. Same thing down here, same kind of question. It has a little extraneous information, which we'll put to use in the next part of the problem. But when we're just talking like his, when he goes for a jog, his heartbeat goes up, right? So he's running, and then his heart rate is, again, he counts for 15 seconds, 46 beats in 15 seconds. So again, multiply by 4, and that's 84 beats per minute. Don't forget to include your units with all of your numbers. So the last question, using the information in B, predict how many times his heart will beat if he runs a 5K. And they give you some conversion information. There are 1.609 kilometers in a mile. So the plan here is we need to figure out, we know what his heart rate is, so we know how many times his heart beats in a minute, but we don't know how many minutes it's going to take him to run a 5K. We do know, though, his general rate of running. He generally runs 1.56 miles in 15 minutes. So the first thing I want to find out is how many miles. So I'm going to convert kilometers to miles. And when I do that, once I convert kilometers to miles, I can use this rate right here to try to figure out how many miles, how many minutes it's going to take him to run those miles. And once I know how many minutes it's going to take, then I can figure out how many beats that is. So that's my plan. Kilometers to miles, then figure out how many minutes it would take him to run those miles, then figure out how many times his heart would beat in that many minutes. So right here, if I'm running a 5K and there's 1.609 kilometers in 1 mile, then I need to divide. Now, if you're trying to decide how to do that, there's a couple of ways. If you're trying to decide, you can say, well, if I'm going from here to here, notice the unit's getting smaller. So there are fewer miles, right? It takes fewer miles to make 1 kilometer. So since it's getting smaller, I want to divide. That's one way to think about it. Another way to think about it is sometimes it's just easier to set up a ratio, okay? This is really a ratio. And then once you have a ratio set up, you can set up a proportion. What I don't know is my miles, and what I do know is my 5 kilometers, right? So then once you set the ratio up and you label it, you know how to set this side up. I don't know miles, I do know kilometers, and then cross multiply, it takes care of that for you. And when you cross multiply, you get 1.609 times x equals 5, divide by 1.609. So see here, I said we were going to divide. I reasoned through that saying we were going to divide, but here you didn't really have to think about it. It worked out. The math worked out. Either way, we find out that 5 kilometers is the same thing as 3.1075 miles. Now we need to change that to minutes, and I definitely want to use a proportion here because this ratio, it's more complicated. I could think about turning this one gets more complicated. I prefer definitely when I have 2 numbers in a ratio to set up the ratio like this. So I can run 1.5, or Stephen can run 1.5 miles in 15 minutes. And I want to know how many minutes it's going to take to run 3.1075 miles, right? So I set up my ratio here. I set up a ratio here with what I don't know, making sure the units match. and then I set equals, I cross multiply, and I'm not going to show all that work for cross multiplication, but when I am done cross multiplying, it shows that this is going to be the same. This is going to mean that I run for 31 minutes and 31.075 minutes. Okay, so about a half an hour. So then the question is, how many beats is that? So this one, I'm not going to set up a proportion to think through. That's pretty simple. If his heart beats at 184 beats every minute, then I need to take this number times 184. So that ends up being 5,717.8 times. So that's a multi-step problem that gets us through to how many times his heart beats, where we use proportional thinking and ratios and unit conversion in different ways.